You are listening to episode 186 of Mitolife Radio. I am Matt Blackburn, and today I'm interviewing Dr. Tyler Panzner. He received his PhD in cellular and molecular pharmacology at Stony Brook University in New York. He studied neuroscience and breast cancer, cell metastasis, and tumor immunology. And he's always been fascinated with genetics and how that code can affect our health and even change the way that different supplements affect us. So the basic idea that one supplement might be good for one person, but not be good for another person. And what I really like about Tyler is he does break down a lot of these supplement formulas that are out there that have a million ingredients, way too many ingredients in one formula, and how a lot of these are monoamine oxidase inhibitors, MAOIs, which can have detrimental effects on someone's physiology and specifically their emotional health. So it's fun to interview someone that shares my same passion for supplementation because he agrees that it's a really powerful tool to use. So in this interview, Tyler explains what DNA is, what SNPs are, his thoughts on epigenetics, and what role that plays in our health. He talks about MTHFR mutation, COMT mutation, which is less talked about. He talks about black pepper and specifically piperine. He talks about depression, anxiety, GABA, different supplements. And then I ask him questions from the listeners, including, is there genetic testing that isn't shared with the NSA and the government? Tips for preventing rogue cells from mutating and developing metastases. Is depression related to genetics? Vitamin C and iron overload. Amino acid therapy for depression and anxiety. Is there a genetic basis for difficulty in gaining weight? VDR mutations and vitamin D supplementation, germ versus terrain theory, what supplements should someone take if they have MTHFR, and a lot more. So enjoy the interview. Here is Dr. Tyler Panzner. All right, Dr. Tyler Panzner, welcome to the show.
What's going on, Matt? How are you doing?
Doing awesome. Yeah, we've been chatting on social media for the last several months and really like what you're doing, what you're sharing on there. It's new information on social media. It's a lot of just regurgitation of information and just copy paste from different people and not a lot of like new information. And so I always appreciate when I find someone like you that's bringing something new to the table and even challenging my beliefs and making me question things. Like I question my own beliefs all the time. It's just really refreshing. So I appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate that. Yeah, I'm trying to bring not only new information, but I think that a lot of these different health influencers, health practitioners, functional medicine doctors, I think a lot of them are right about what they're saying. I'm trying to bring in the level of how do you know which modality is best for which person? And I really think that genetics is greatly underappreciated and overlooked for things. And I think that maybe not right now. What I'm trying to plan to do, you can do some of the stuff now, but as genetics continue to get cheaper to sequence and the analysis tools get better, we're just going to get more and more information. So you could tell someone with a high level of confidence, you would do best on a low oxalate diet due to XYZ, or you would do best on keto, or you would do good with high dose vitamin D, or that may cause you inflammation. So I'm trying to give new information, but also the nuanced application of these different modalities that all, you know what it's like, the super emotional tribalism of my way or the highway. Mm-hmm. Carnivore is great for everyone. You're dumb if you're doing it. This is great for everyone. So I'm trying to just kind of shake all that up because I do think there's a time and place for specific people for all these different modalities.
Yeah, that contextual piece. I love that. So what's your elevator pitch for genetics? So we've heard of DNA and RNA and coding, but I think people have, including myself, probably like not a very clear picture of what it's about. And some people recently, the last 2 years, I think have kind of lost it, just questioning whether cells exist or DNA exists or all these things, but we won't go down that rabbit hole. But
yeah. So, I mean, basically, I'm sure most people are aware, DNA is your code of life. It's a whole bunch of different letters, A, T, C, or G, like from the movie Gattaca. And things called single nucleotide polymorphism, also called SNPs, are when there's a misspelling of a certain area of a gene. Now, that can cause, not all SNPs cause issues. Some of them could be in non-coding regions or areas of enzymes in the sequence that don't cause a difference in the actual catalytic activity of the enzymes. However, there are a lot of SNPs that can make different enzymes work faster, work slower, or a transport protein. So you can't absorb certain vitamins, minerals, or nutrients as effectively, or transport them in your body, or even the receptors on your cells. So they're less responsive to these different vitamins and nutrients. And people like to say everyone keeps saying the stats of a couple papers have said this, 90% of things are epigenetics, lifestyle, 10% is genetics. I personally think that we know far too little about genetics to say that, because another up and coming field of genetics is not just the misspellings of certain letters in the genome, but things called structural variation. So you could have entire segments of a promoter area of a gene that's deleted or duplicated. And you may have a totally normal wild type protein being expressed, but you're going to be expressing much, much more of it or much, much less of it. So if you think about it, a mutated protein that works too slowly, that's expressed at a normal level, basically has the same overall effect as expressing a normal protein too little. Because either way, you have too little of activity. So I guess it's a pretty long elevator ride. But basically, I think that there's so much we can learn about our bodies through our genomes now. Not even just predicting rates of disease, but I tend to focus on things that are more black and white. You don't absorb enough vitamin B12. And most of the time you go to get the blood work done, they're very low in B12. And for example, if you have a mutation in the FUT2 gene, which is what absorbs it intestinally, you may not get much out of oral B12. You may need IV vitamins. And that goes for all different vitamins, vitamin E, vitamin D, vitamin C, serotonin synthesis, dopamine degradation, all of these different things. You can almost kind of predict someone's behavior. And when clients come to me to work with me and they have all these autoimmune issues, and every histamine pathway is upregulated, different inflammatory pathways are upregulated, it's like, wow, no crap. I could tell just by looking at your genome that you're probably someone that deals with a lot of autoimmune issues.
Yeah, that's the cool part about it. Like I know you work with self-decode, and years ago I ran my 23andMe through, I think it was Genetic Genie, and there are a few other websites you can use.
I like Genetic Genie as well for the methylation report. They have a pretty good one there. It's free.
But I had no idea what I was looking at. And the cool thing about self-decode is it makes it really easy to see. I mean, it's kind of for kindergartners. It's like,
exactly. That's why I really like it. It's written at an 8th grade reading level. And I looked for a while at different companies I wanted to work with, because my PhD was in cellular molecular pharmacology. I studied neuropharmacology. I'm very interested in mood, behavior, depression, but my thesis work was in tumor immunology. So I was interested in inflammation, but genetics is more so my own interest once 23andMe came out. So I've been doing the old Control F, different RSIDs in the raw data file for years now. It's just so incredibly clunky. It's not scalable. I was just doing it for free for friends and family. But now through self-decode as a practitioner, I'm able to use really deep analytical tools. They use artificial intelligence to really extract and impute so much more data than someone like 23andMe or Ancestry DNA would be able to do. So I'm just super, super excited. It's pretty much like my dream job to be able to do this. And I'm really interested in the health optimization side. All of medicine is focused on preventing the very sick, ill, and dying, keeping them alive another day. Hugely important. But I'm interested in your average person. And sadly, the average person is chronically inflamed. They deal with anxiety, micronutrient deficiencies. That's the average person in reality nowadays. So helping them have a more optimal and just more fulfilling life by learning how to be inflammation free, learning what will trigger them. Are they more susceptible to mold toxicities due to alterations in the genetic pathways for the mold detoxification, et cetera?
Yeah, and it even has like behavioral stuff like hoarding, creativity. It's
Yeah.
funny, mine's more likely to be hoarding, which is kind of true. I just love devices and supplements, and it's just kind of my way of prepping or whatever. But it's good to be aware of that, you know.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this before we started recording. There's kind of like this anti-supplement movement that is like all you need is food or whole food supplements or organ meat supplements, and that's all you need. And you don't need to go to quote unquote synthetics or quote isolates. But reality doesn't really match that kind of philosophy, especially when you start looking at genetic mutations, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, you could, for those of you that don't know, homozygous means you get two alleles for genes, one from mom, one from dad. Homozygous mutant means you have two mutant copies of that gene. So all of the proteins that are expressed are going to be mutated. Heterozygous means you could have one mutated and one normal or wild type. So if you think about it, if someone has a homozygous mutation in the enzyme that produces serotonin, no matter what epigenetic meditation stuff they do, living a normally healthy diet, they're not going to be producing enough serotonin. So, and that goes across for a lot of these different types of vitamins and nutrients. If all of your transport proteins that absorb vitamin B12 from your gut are mutated, you're going to have a nearly impossible time just eating regular diet, wholesome diet, and still absorbing proper nutrients. I'm a good example of this. I have genes in vitamin D activation, vitamin D transport, and the vitamin D nuclear receptor. And I was in the middle of the summer and I did a post on this, and my vitamin D levels were super low. And I'm one of those few people that I think need the vitamin D year round. But of course, you also need to match that with the supporting nutrients, vitamin K2, magnesium. And I remember that's kind of one of the things that made you kind of scratch your head, because I definitely agree. I think that vitamin D is over supplemented, especially without any of the other supporting nutrients. And I'm a good example of it. If I didn't supplement with vitamin D, I love the beach. I'm in the sun all the time. And how much food would I have to eat to maybe try and get the adequate amount just for me personally? But I just have a very, I guess, shit luck of 3 different converging pathways of vitamin D. How prevalent are all 3 of those? I'm not exactly sure. But saying that everyone can just eat a clean diet and exercise and get all their nutrients, I think it's just absolutely ridiculous. Nobody has a perfect genome with no mutations at all. It just depends on your ancestry and where certain areas of the world, where those pockets and gene pools were kind of bottlenecking, and where those were passed on to you generations down.
That's awesome. Yeah, I always recommend cod liver oil, like a really high quality one, because it's balanced with the vitamin A, which I think that's like often a missing piece with vitamin D. Like we're aware of like K2 and magnesium, maybe less so, but even less so like retinol and vitamin A. And like you kind of need all 3, in my opinion, to balance it out, and probably even more stuff that we're not even aware of.
Yeah. Yeah. But I actually, before this, because I know that you're a big vitamin E, vitamin A guy, like there's different genes. Like I pulled some up: NPC1L1, SRB1, CD36. All 3 of these are absorption of the enterocytes in your gut for vitamin D, provitamin A carotenoids, so like beta carotene. So like that's involved in things that get converted into vitamin A in your body. So it's been shown that if you have mutations in those, you're going to be having decreased absorption of vitamin E from your blood into your tissues. So if you have a mutated gene, your serum vitamin E levels or vitamin A levels may be high, but you're going to have a much harder time pulling them into your cells and tissues where it actually matters. And I think you posted something about the vitamin D metabolite, how it's just testing. It kind of made me scratch my head too. Just testing the serum levels doesn't really tell you the full picture of things. At the end of the day, it matters what's actually in your cells and tissues. The blood is just a highway transport system. So if all of it's still parked on the highway in rush hour traffic, it's basically useless.
Yeah, that's the frustrating thing that I've been trying to figure out, because I want to get back into doing blood work, just because I think it's kind of fun to see how, how it changes. But when you get to like A, D, E, and K, fat soluble vitamins, and even like copper and zinc, a lot of it's stored in the tissues, right? Like whether it's the liver or the brain or wherever. And we can't test those yet. I'm sure in our lifetime we'll be able to, and maybe that technology already exists. But I mean, besides like a liver biopsy, it's hard to see, your true nutrient status. If these things are being stored in the liver, it's like you can't look there directly, to my understanding.
No, yeah. As far as I know, there's no test for that. And I also been like, I want to learn more about blood work. Self-decode is cool. You can upload blood work to there. And also what's really interesting, the whole algorithm takes all your genetics into the equation. It'll change your high, medium, low, normal ranges based on your genetics. So just because a certain nutrient you may be low in, once it takes into account your mutations, you may not actually be that low, or vice versa with things being high. And that's another huge issue with the hugely wide, healthy ranges for normal conventional medicine. You're not taking into account any of these different mutations that people may have. But I want to learn about more blood work as well, because I'm coming from the more mechanistic molecular biology genetic side of things. But like, I'll tell you right now, I'm not a full-fledged functional medicine doctor by any means right now, but I want to learn more on how to read the blood work and apply it to clients. But at the same point, kind of what you just said, it's like, what am I really checking here at this point, especially for the fat soluble vitamins?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I've been diving into the iron thing the last couple of years. I've had Morley Robbins on the show multiple times, and he's a big fan of donating blood. And that's a really interesting topic with, so many rabbit holes to go down. But it seems like I have the genes for hereditary hemochromatosis.
Yep.
And so I would say in my case, it's a definite that I should be donating blood. I mean, how often is, debatable, but it's for sure that I should be.
Yeah. And actually I have your report up here. I added Matt as a client right before this to look. And the top report too was also high calcium levels. And they say here that, having excess supplemental vitamin D can cause that. I think it's super ironic that you're so vocal about being careful with exogenous vitamin D. And ironically, you happen to be one of the people that should be watching that the most. I just thought that was super ironic, and you're already on the right path with things.
Yeah. Yeah. And fatty liver, I think, was something that I'm more apt to have. And I think Alzheimer's neurodegeneration, which is kind of scary. So whenever I have brain fog or stuff like that, I'm hyper alert. But yeah, there's so many pieces. We were just saying before we started recording, there's the new amyloid plaque theory, right?
Yeah.
Alzheimer's.
Oh, there was a huge, huge scandal. I mean, basically, it looks like I was going to do a post on it. Wait till there's more information. I wonder if they're going to release the actual photos that were duplicated. But basically, it looks like throughout 16 years of research, they were taking photos from like one paper, and then years later, copy pasting that in another paper, showing some other different finding. And as someone that's done like basic mechanistic research from grad school, it's incredibly easy and tempting to change one little data point or copy paste one little image. And what are the odds someone goes looking and digs for that? And turns out, I think someone was actually shorting Amgen, the company that came out with that new Alzheimer's drug. I forgot the name of it. It was several months ago it came out, and there was a huge uproar in the community because the data did not support approving this drug, and it got approved anyway. And now what do you know? They're saying that the amyloid precursor, the amyloid plaques, aren't actually a response, aren't actually a cause of Alzheimer's, but rather an effect that your brain does to try and protect itself from the true cause of Alzheimer's. Now, which they haven't exactly narrowed that down yet. They do say insulin resistance. They call it type 3 diabetes. So diabetes of the brain is Alzheimer's as well. That kind of ties into one of the things I'm very vocal about is the different flavors of diseases. Different flavors of diseases, meaning it's known that high iron can cause Alzheimer's. So let's say someone has genes for hereditary hemochromatosis. They have high iron their whole lives versus someone that is predisposed to type 2 diabetes. They don't live a healthy lifestyle. Person A has excess iron. Person B has severe insulin resistance of the brain. They both get Alzheimer's. It's different root genetic causes and different lifestyle epigenetic drivers of their disease. So expecting both those people to respond to the same type of drug is crazy. Like if someone had Alzheimer's in their family and I saw that they also had these type 2 diabetes risk genes, I would say you should be taking supplements cinnamon or berberine or fenugreek or certain things to help modulate that blood sugar and make sure you don't go into the danger zone. Versus if you had hereditary hemochromatosis, make sure you're watching your blood iron levels as well. But that's not to say if you don't have type 2 diabetes risk genes, you can't get insulin resistance and vice versa. It's never Huntington's disease is one of those diseases where it's locked in stone, basically written in stone. If you have a mutation in the Huntington gene, you're going to get Huntington's eventually. But that's very, very rare. Very, very few diseases are actually like that. It's more like a cumulative risk thing of genetics on top of your epigenetics. They say genetics loads the gun, environment pulls the trigger. And I definitely believe in that. I just feel like so many people are saying that. I know people were also saying that only 1% to 2% of Alzheimer's cases are due to genetic drivers, genetics. But just because you don't need to have a mutation in the amyloid precursor protein to be at increased risk for Alzheimer's. So in my opinion, I think you could have risk genes to put you predisposed for Alzheimer's. In my book, I would call that a genetic cause of Alzheimer's. It doesn't guarantee your whole family will get it, but lifestyles also tend to run in families as well.
Those are really good points. Yeah. And the individualized supplementation is the part that gets me excited, because I've been studying supplements for like the last 10 years, 12 years, something like that. And I just notice, multivitamins, multi-mineral supplements I've seen over the years. I've gone in people's kitchen cabinets and just seen all the stuff that they take. And it's a real shotgun approach. And not a lot of people know why they're taking certain supplements.
Exactly.
From the people I've talked to. And it's like, I think you should have a basic idea of why you're taking something. And the supplements that I kind of shotgun recommend to people are just based upon the things that we probably grew up on, like canola oil. I was in Southern California and went out to eat with my friends, and it was, crappy Mexican food, just like my whole childhood. And then, I had a huge chlorine exposure, which I've been kind of meditating on the last couple months, because chlorine decimates your vitamin C and your iodine and probably other things, but I'm aware of those two for sure.
And you think that could persist for that long? Like you're saying this was childhood exposure. It can persist for that long? That's pretty wild.
I mean, it was 20 years of exposure. And so I wonder.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Like, it wasn't just one pool time. Like I grew up with that little chlorine.
So most of your life to date you've been exposed longer than you haven't been exposed at this point.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Is that something you've thought about, like decades of exposure to different things? So I think in the health community, people tend to consider like heavy metal exposure, mercury or lead or cadmium or whatever. But I feel like there's so many other exposures that people have gotten that.
Yeah, I know me personally, my life changed so much when I fully eliminated gluten. And I know I ate that my whole life. And I know there's a bunch of people that say it's not the gluten, it's the glyphosate. And I agree with that, but I also don't agree with it. I think that's true for some people. Again, look at the genetics. Look at I have all the HLA, MHC2, immunological recognition SNPs for celiac disease. I never get any GI issues. However, I get neurological brain fog, fatigue, and it took me a while to connect that together. And I ate gluten my whole time growing up. And that's something, to me, looking back, it's like, yeah, I've done well in my life, working through that, but how much more could I have achieved if I knew that ahead of time? Or, for example, I have a MTHFR mutation as well. So quick, kind of what you mentioned about knowing why you're taking what you're taking. Quick story about me with my mutations. I found out I had an MTHFR mutation. And of course, I go to get methylated B vitamins, methylfolate. I'm taking that. I noticed I was taking the first couple of days I took a full one. Eventually I'm taking like 1/5 of one of the pills, because otherwise I'm too revved up later in the day. I'd say borderline anxiety versus, you have that gap between like excess energy and anxiety. You're not it's not exactly a negative like doomsday feeling, but still it's like, I got to get ready to go to bed and I'm ready to run through a brick wall. Not in a bad way, but you got to stay on the routine. Circadian rhythm is so important. And then it was a couple months ago, doing more reading as I'm getting my self-decode stuff going. I also have a COMT mutation, which definitely affects my personality, anxiety risk, but also I realized it affects methylation. So I realized it makes me much more prone to anxiety from methyl donors. So I got it's called Pure Genomics from Pure Encapsulations, really cool multivitamin that takes into account a lot of different SNPs and mutations. It has adenylyl and hydroxyl B12 instead of methyl. I've been taking that for about a month now, and I just feel, I look back now, I thought I was doing the right thing, getting the methyl B vitamin. And then I learned again that no, I need to have the hydroxyl and adenylyl B12. And it's like, I felt so much better taking the methyl versus just regular B12, but I'm still a little overstimulated. But now I feel so great and energized and enthusiastic without the overstimulation. I can get to bed on time now. And it's so funny, that little tweak of removing that 1/5 of the methyl B12 and swapping it for other sources makes all the difference. And that's why when people like think that, I'm sure, there's people that are like, screw mechanisms, all that matters is the randomized controlled trials, this and that. But I'm a true scientist. I want to get down to the nitty gritty details. And I love doing things people haven't done before. I'm one of those people. I have a feeling you're one of those people too. If I found mouse data that X mutation that's present in humans causes the elevation of something, and that gene's present in humans, and I find a supplement that helps lower what's elevated, I personally have no problem. I don't even consider it rolling the dice. If it's a natural supplement that's been shown to affect something in a mouse study or even a bacteria study, basic mechanisms, right. It's not like we're talking pharmaceuticals here, chemotherapy drugs. There's very little risk involved with these natural herbs and supplements. I have no problem doing that and trying that and seeing if it works. What's the worst case scenario? It doesn't work. I get a little nausea. I'm transiently anxious. I'll roll the dice on that. I don't really see that as a risk, but so many people would say, that's mumbo jumbo. There's no clinical data, this and that. But I'm trying to really move forward and move the progress needle with personalized health optimization. And that's the kind of stuff you got to do.
Yeah, I heard yesterday or something, that argument that because it's a mouse or a rat study, it doesn't apply to humans, or it possibly doesn't apply to humans. But if we always wait for human studies, we'd be waiting a lot longer, right, to make changes.
Exactly. I mean, there's definitely a good point, and I especially think that holds true for nutritional studies. But my background comes from a lot of mood, behavior type things, and a lot of the things that affect mood and behavior in mice, I think it translates a lot more to humans versus nutritional things. I think that the brain is more similar than the digestive system and metabolism. And of course, you always keep that in mind. I would never take a study and say, I think they did a study with mice with keto and cancer or something, and it helped. I would never go recommending to someone based on that when there's that much risk involved, when you actually are about to die. But if it's someone that's just wanting to be better, fix their inflammation, you have a mutation in the NF-kappa B pathway. Oh, curcumin's a great NF-kappa B inhibitor. But then it gets all nuanced when you say, oh, wait, you also have an monoamine oxidase mutation, which means you may get anxious from curcumin. So then I have to try and think, what's an NF-kappa B inhibitor that's not also a monoamine oxidase inhibitor? And that's when I go deep trying to find the exact right puzzle piece of things. And that's what led me to realize a lot of these really good health supplements that people say are great, polyphenols and stuff, a lot of them have a lot of different mechanisms. So there'll be an iron chelator plus a COMT inhibitor, which means if I take that with my COMT mutation, I'm going to be anxious as hell the whole day. I cannot tolerate that. Some people can, but it's almost like trying to find, I've almost had the idea of taking natural molecules and chemically altering them so they maintain one mechanism, but not others. I think a lot of people are also messing themselves up by taking supplements that are good anti-inflammatories that are also iron chelators, and they may already be anemic or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I know methylene blue is really popular, and I used it when I had COVID, and I was doing like 60 drops once or twice a day, and I feel like it helped in addition to hyperbaric and other things I was doing. But methylene blue is like a pretty potent inhibitor of monoamine oxidase.
Interesting. I personally never tried it, and hearing that, it's like I might stay away. I'm so sensitive to those MAOIs, but I didn't know that.
Yeah, because MAOIs you're saying that can really mess people up if they have these genetic mutations that they're not aware of.
Exactly. And also MAO is also involved with end-stage histamine metabolism as well. So if you have someone that has mutations in DAO or HNMT, and then if you also throw an MAOI in there, It depends. There's no black and white answer because like piperine, for example, is a great MAOI. I do pretty well on that. I just got to have to take a low dose. It's also a great anti-inflammatory. So will that anti-inflammatory effect outweigh the MAOI that may inhibit the histamine degradation? I'm not exactly sure. I don't have all the answers for that, but that's how I mentally approach all these things. All these different natural chemicals have so many different mechanisms, and you should be understanding all of them. I made a post the other day. I think piperine's in so many different supplements. And me personally, I have a cup or two of coffee in the morning. And if I take 5 milligrams of piperine, I'll be flying throughout the day and then overstimulated at night because you're slowly accumulating those neurotransmitters. How many people, I think it's like 30-40% of people have at least one mutant COMT allele. I have two, but 30-40% of people may be susceptible to the piperine that everyone uses to boost the absorption of the other ingredients. So I gave a warning to everyone, hey, if you're overstimulated or anxious, that curcumin you're taking, that 99% of the time has piperine, that may be your issue. And also curcumin is also an MAOI itself. So you're boosting the absorption of an MAOI with another MAOI. I lost your audio. I don't know if you're still talking.
Oh, sorry.
There you go. You're good.
There's chainsaws in the background, so I'm trying to.
Gotcha.
Yeah, those are good points. Yeah, years ago when I was experimenting with a bunch of different supplements, I took a supplement with a bunch of stuff, and it had black pepper extract, and titanium dioxide as an excipient. And I don't know if it was the combo of those, but I think I tried it 2 or 3 times, and every time I had an upset stomach. Mm-hmm. And now I don't. If something has black pepper extract, I just stay away from it just to be safe.
Yeah, I personally like having mine on the side, just purely on its own. Because if I don't sleep well, I take like 2.5 milligrams, which is pretty low dose. Most things have at least 3, 5, even 10 milligrams. I've even seen some products that have 30 milligrams of piperine in sleep products. And I'm just like, it also depends what time of the day you take it. It's not like taking that late at night when you're tired with other sedatives is going to wake you up per se, but you also got to remember it's a huge inhibitor of the cytochrome enzymes. So if you're taking prescription medications with that, you're going to be dramatically altering the dose of those things. And all these companies always say, consult your doctor first. So they're protected liability wise, but I don't say they don't care about the customer, but like it's not their job to check every customer with pharmacogenomics to see how you metabolize these drugs. But these inhibitors are all around us.
Is the COMT mutation, is that related to caffeine? Or I forget the one, like the way you metabolize coffee?
No, so that's the CYP1A2 mutation. Mm-hmm. But however, think about it this way, caffeine also makes you release dopamine and catecholamines. And that means a COMT, it doesn't affect the metabolism of your caffeine, but it affects the metabolism of the dopamine you dump from the caffeine. So I have both of those mutations. I'm a slow metabolizer. So I have my caffeine in the morning before the gym. I'm good the entire day. I would never even think about redosing on caffeine unless I planned on being up and at 'em well past midnight, which normally I'm in bed around 10 o'clock. So,
yeah.
And then my wife is the other side. She's the hypermetabolizer. And ironically, that CYP1A2 also metabolizes melatonin. So not only am I sensitive to caffeine, I'm also sensitive to melatonin, which is sort of like it's interesting that 2 opposing supplements are metabolized the same way. My wife takes 10 times the melatonin dose of me and never wakes up tired. I think that's one of the main reasons why she's a morning person, because the second she wakes up, she has very low melatonin levels because she chewed through all of it. Versus me, I'm more of a night owl, probably because I accumulate with my COMT mutation, I accumulate the catecholamines throughout the day. And then my melatonin, I metabolize it. Sorry, let me think. I metabolize it slower, but I also have mutations in the receptor itself. So I have less receptors. So it's one of those things. It's like eventually it gets so complex. And there's been times to go too far down the rabbit hole. And I'm like, I'm driving myself insane. I feel good 98% of the time. So just deal with it. I'm sure you've had times too, where I remember one time I was getting such bad bags under my eyes. I think I was stressing my liver out. I was taking Alcar, green tea extract, this, that, all these different things at once. And it's like, you can't possibly take all the supplements. For any one ailment or mechanism, there's dozens of supplements that could fix that. So how can you possibly take all of them?
Yeah, you have to really split it up, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But even then, you can only take so many pills at once.
Exactly. I try to do more of a minimalistic approach now. And cycle different things that I need. Of course, magnesium, boron, shilajit, B complex, those types of things are always in it for me. But regarding the more booster things like an Alcar, L-tyrosine, I need to take the tiniest dose because of that COMT mutation. I don't like that one too much, but we all go through that period where we're balls to the wall, more is better, and then you kind of wane back and forth over time.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up melatonin because that's one that I've been looking into the last couple weeks. And I don't know if you've seen Doris Loh. She's on like LinkedIn and she has a couple interviews, but she's been talking a lot about ascorbic acid and melatonin for cancer, for COVID, for a lot of different things, even like anti-aging for both of those.
I saw the melatonin stuff with for COVID. What was the other one you said for cancer?
Vitamins, just ascorbic acid. Yeah, for cancer and
gotcha. Melatonin and vitamin C, or just one for the cancer?
Well, kind of separate, but they work different mechanisms. And what's interesting is like, I guess EMF exposure decreases your melatonin production. So just being in an apartment, because it's interesting, like the community I've been in for several years, it's like all you need is blue blocking glasses and, get morning sun or afternoon sun, have your breakfast outside. But I think some people might need more than that. I'm starting to wonder if they actually need to supplement. And the misconception is it decreases your own production, but it can actually increase it, right?
Yeah, there were studies showing there were no change even after long term. I think that's some pretty old data. It's funny you mentioned that. I just mentioned I forgot if I have melatonin type 1A or type 1B, but I'm heterozygous for that mutation. And the study they did on that, the author suggested in the discussion that it most likely makes you more susceptible to light when sleeping. So I'm one of those people that I got blue blockers and it changed my life. I got eye covers, it changed my life. And it's ironic. My mom does the earplugs, eye covers, and what do you know, when she got sequenced too, she's the one that gave me that one allele, not my dad. And it's like you said, I really think certain people do need to supplement with these things. I metabolize melatonin slower than a normal person, but I also have less type 1B receptors on my cell surface. So I accumulate more of it, yet my cells are less sensitive to it. So again, it's one of those things that what outweighs the other. But I personally, I take melatonin every night, but I'm very sensitive to it because I degrade it so slowly. My wife will take 3 milligrams sometimes. And if I take anything over, I think they said around 300 micrograms is the physiological release for a human on average at night, what it pulses at night. And I take maybe 300, 500 is maybe 1 milligram if I really just got to knock out for a while. But I'll definitely wake up groggy at that dose. But I'm definitely a proponent of melatonin overall. It hasn't been shown to alter your endogenous release. But again, do you really need it per se? And it's also one of the things too. Some people do well on supplements they may not genetically need, I also give supplement recommendations that are just based on symptoms because not everything in order for it to work needs to be genetically susceptible. Sometimes things just work for people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was talking to my friend John yesterday, and he said he mouth tapes and uses a nasal dilator at night. And I never considered using both for whatever reason, because I've always been a nose breather, not a mouth breather during the day. But I found out through, girlfriends over the years that I snore intermittently, and that really affects, oxygen getting to your brain. And so there's so many things like that I'm saying that are beyond supplements, right? That it may just be other things you could do.
It's not all just popping pills, and that's one of those things. I came from the pharmacology side, like supplement scientist. What pill can I take to get the effect? But now, I've been doing that for so long. I'm trying to learn more activity-based things as well, to biohack that way. I always thought, what pill could I take to get this effect? But, the blue blockers or the sun exposure or this or that, like those types of things are really interesting too. And another piece of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So on the self-decode, you can actually search, like I just searched melatonin and it says your SNP table and it shows all the different variants with the frequencies. it seems like for someone just getting into this, they need someone like you to kind of walk them through it, right?
Yeah. So that was when I was initially speaking with them about becoming a practitioner. They said that's their biggest complaint, because I must say the wording itself, very easy to understand. There's all the hyperlinks with references to that peer-reviewed study to back up the claim right there. But either way, it is just so much information. And on top of that, Self-Decode is great, but like I told you about the mouse study type thing, they're not going to connect those dots and say that if it's just based on mouse data. They'll give it a 1 out of 5 evidence-based, which looks like it's nothing. But if you have someone like me that can kind of connect those dots, it may be worth trying that 1 out of 5 evidence thing. You get what I'm saying? So it's like, yeah, for anyone listening, reach out. My code Dr. Pans lets you save on the subscription in order to get a kit. And then I also offer additional consultation. You can reach out to me, DM me about that. But overall, out of the other places I looked, this is definitely the most comprehensive, and they're adding more stuff every day. I think last week I told you they added like 10 or 12 new reports. You just click generate report. Not all of them are super in depth. Some of them are only a couple different snips, but at the end of the day, they're keeping up with the most cutting edge research. A new paper comes out, within that week, they'll have it attached to a report and sent to you, which I just think is really cool. That with the subscription, if you invest in that lifetime subscription, you're getting such insane value over the coming years and decades as they continue to iterate and build upon what they're trying to do.
It's pretty awesome. Yeah. Some of the stuff I read that is just completely in line with my experience and my symptoms I've had over the years. So it just totally makes sense.
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying with, with people saying that, and listen, I think epigenetics are hugely important too. Lifestyle is huge. Your environment's huge, but I've really yet to see someone that has these types of mutations that the blood work doesn't match it or their symptoms don't match it. And you can help yourself with things, but it really does seem to follow very tightly, because at the end of the day, you can hack your genetic code through epigenetics, but at the end of the day, yes, you can induce more expression of a protein, but at the end of the day, if that protein's non-functional, you're going to be increasing a non or minimally functional protein and get possibly very minor or modest results.
Right. Or even like possibly negative results, right, with supplements. Because I think a lot of people, there's this view, I think, that's pervasive in the natural health field that supplements are safe and pharmaceuticals are harmful, but supplements could be just as damaging as pharmaceuticals if they're taken out of context, wrong dosage, with certain mutations. Do you agree with
that? Absolutely. To me, when people say drugs, to me, I'm a pharmacologist. Anything that interacts with human physiology is a drug in my book. So natural drug, pharmaceutical drug, they're all the same thing. Arsenic's natural. That's an incredibly toxic poison, and there's like ketamine is a man-made anesthetic that is making huge waves and breakthroughs for mental health, neurodegeneration, autoimmune disorders. So it doesn't really matter the source of it. And man, I remember you saying the synthetic versus the whole food vitamin C. At the end of the day, it just matters how it interacts. It matters about the molecular structure. Are there certain cofactors in whole food or natural forms that may enhance certain aspects? Yes, absolutely. But saying that isolates and stuff are just garbage, I don't agree with that at all. I mean, sometimes that could be the case, could be slightly less efficacious, but I definitely disagree with that statement.
Yeah, that was a big drama last couple of weeks.
You blocked a lot of people with that.
Well, just, I mean, that the people behind the whole food vitamin C movement, and I've been a part of it just because I was so convinced, because the evidence was convincing that it is a complex. But when you look even at elementary school view of the clinical studies, there's no study that says whole food vitamin C complex. It's all ascorbic acid. It's that's just an isolate, and that's what the body uses. That's what they used in the studies. They didn't use a bioflavonoid complex,
Yeah. Yeah. And it's too, I have the mutation. I think it's SLC23A1, one of the vitamin C. So vitamin C can be either facilitated diffusion through the glucose transporters or actively absorbed with the two active transporters. I have one bad copy of both of those transporters. So I have a reduced ability to absorb vitamin C intestinally. And it's like, imagine how many people, and those same exact mutations have been studied for people. They do have lower vitamin C levels, and they're at risk for, I believe, glaucoma and Crohn's disease were the two diseases that were intimately studied. But I'm in the line of thinking that just because it's those two, those are just the only two that have been studied. That doesn't mean that there's not more diseases that these gene mutations can be related to. If someone has two bad copies of that and they have low vitamin C levels, they should be taking vitamin C. And then it's like, yes, you all have to monitor, the increased iron absorption. It's not just a one easy fix for all of these things. But again, what you see on the screen with the genome pretty much all the time matches the overall phenotype with the blood work, and a lot of times the phenotype of whatever the ailment or inflammation is for that individual.
What's your views on liposomal? Because you brought up an interesting point with the vitamin C absorption, because Doris Loh has some pretty compelling stuff to share about that our gut bacteria love ascorbic acid. And so if you can handle it, and I feel great taking it, like I think we need more acid going in. A lot of people have low acid stress and low hydrochloric acid. And I feel like it's helping my digestion and overall health and everything. But there's this perspective or messaging in the natural health community that I've seen that's been growing in popularity for years, which is like, you want to bypass the stomach and you want to just, get it almost IV style in through liposomes. But, liposomal melatonin, liposomal vitamin C, liposomal glutathione, which I think probably makes the most sense because that gets destroyed in the gut. But like, liposomal everything, I really question if that's necessary and beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I tried a liposomal curcumin a while ago. It just made me so freaking nauseous. I think it also depends what the liposomes are made of. And like a lot of my thesis work focused on exosomes in the context of tumor immunology. So part of my lab was working on synthetic liposome development and stuff. And it depends a lot, I think, on what the liposomes are made of, and also on your genetics. And also, I think taking cost versus benefit, I think is something a lot of people need to take into account too, especially with how much of a shit show all the macroeconomics have been lately. It's so expensive for those liposomal. It is hard. It's a lot of money to make those. And I don't know, I could just see those companies, they can charge so much. Why not charge even more to boost their margins? I don't know that much about it. I haven't used that much liposomal things. I would think an IV may be better. I know I'm personally very sensitive to phosphatidylserine. It makes me very, very tired feeling. And if you're taking liposomes that are a bunch of phosphatidylserine, you got to be aware of the components of the actual liposomal membrane as well. I think there could be benefits for some people. Yes. But again, do you have issues absorbing those? Are you one of those people that actually need that? And that's, again, kind of where I feel like I'm carving my niche in this ecosystem is which products makes the most sense for you. Do you actually need the liposomal vitamin C? If you have no mutations in the absorption proteins, why are you paying more money for that? Try regular vitamin C and go get blood work done and see if that's working on it. And again, what is the actual liposomal membrane comprised of?
That's a good point. Yeah. Did you ever experiment with glutathione? I know that's such a popular one.
No, I haven't, honestly.
Yeah, because I know we make it and we need certain cofactors and like.
Yeah, vitamin C helps with recycling it and stuff. But like, honestly, I remember I was telling you before this, I've been doing my 10, 15-minute walks after every meal in the sun, this and that. I switched up that vitamin. I've been feeling so good the vast majority of the time. And it's like starting to realize now when you're feeling great, leave things as is, like how good can you really feel? Like if you're energetic most of the day, you get your good 7, 8.5 hours of sleep and you're happy and content. What's the point of continuing the biohacking? Nestle there for a little bit. And of course, the scientist in us, the experimenter, always wants to tweak things, but don't be so quick to rush it when you're feeling good.
That's a great point. Yeah. My thing is it's fun to like see how much energy it can have, which
yes,
juggling so much, but like it's always a fun experiment to see, can I get more energy and less brain fog and all that. So yeah. Let's see. I guess we could jump into the questions just to have some things to to go off of. Like you mentioned,
Sure.
MTHFR. A lot of people asked about that, and I know that's been a trending topic for years. That
Yeah. No, I'm happy to talk about that. So yeah, I mean, when I was initially doing this on the side for friends and family, friends of friends with the crew Control F23andMe thing, it's probably, I don't know, maybe 50-ish, 80-ish people. And I'm pretty sure all but 2 people had some sort of MTHFR mutation. And I think it's around 40% of people have one mutation, but you also got to remember the people that are seeking me out for help, you're also selecting and filtering for people with issues. The people that feel great aren't going to be wasting their money or time. Very few people are just genuinely interested. Most people, they're driven by their lack of health and wellness. So it's very, very prevalent, very, very common. But there's also so many other genes, BHMT, CBS, MTR, MTRR, SAAH. There's so many other COMT. There's so many other genes involved in methylation aside from just MTHFR. I think MTHFR definitely needs to be addressed. I think it regulates a lot of different processes. And this may just be an anecdote thing. I know it's linked to miscarriages. Sadly, one of my friends had a miscarriage and she ended up having an MTHFR mutation and she got on the methylated B vitamins and they had a gorgeous baby girl. So it's like, I'm not saying for sure that's what it was, but the literature does show it is significantly correlated with pregnancy complications, including miscarriage. So infertility is a huge issue nowadays as well. And also, so many junk food is loaded with folic acid that you're going to be pumping into people. And if they can't process it properly, all these kids eating Pop-Tarts, they're going to have neurological issues and not be able to focus. And what are they going to do? Little Johnny can't focus. He's daydreaming all day. He's hyperactive. Let's put him on Adderall to try and slow him down. And then they're fucked. I think that Adderall is so grossly overused, and it stems back to possibly methylation issues. I've seen people fix their anxiety, their depression, their brain fog, their nagging inflammations just by fixing the methylation. And MTHFR is very common, but there's much more genes than just that people totally overlook. And taking a methylated B vitamin just because you think you may have an MTHFR mutation could end up messing you up more, because you may not have an MTHFR mutation. You may have an MTRR mutation, in which case you need L-methionine supplementation, not the methyl folate or the methyl B12. So it's a huge cycle there. And the cool thing about self-decode is they only have an MTHFR report right now. I told them, let me know if you want help writing a full methylation report. But you could type in any of these genes and it'll pull up all the different RSIDs for all the different mutations, and it'll tell you which ones you have, which is super useful. So yeah, I think MTHFR is hugely important, but I also think there's much, much more to the puzzle that people are overlooking. And you may need different targeted supplements based on that. But either way, elevated homocysteine is linked to so many chronic health diseases, so it should absolutely be addressed.
Yeah. And is that something, when they search that, they have to work with someone like you to?
I don't believe so. Like, are you able to look?
Like
I have the practitioner portal. If you type in the little magnifying glass on your report and you type in a gene, you're able to type in any gene you want, right?
Yeah, I have MTHFR pulled up for me, and it shows impact, and there's the 1 out of 5 little bars.
So I think you could type in any gene you want, and you could pull that up yourself. Now, they may not necessarily have all the RSIDs neatly coordinated into a report that's easy for you to read. So depending on your education level, you may need someone to help you work through that. But that's why I'm so excited to be working with self-decode. I believe in the mission so much. This has been my passion. Our missions align so perfectly. I want to continue to work with them and help them build this up. My main job is the clinical side of things. So more, chromosome deletion, carrier screening, legit clinical disease diagnosis. People reach out to me, hey, I think I have multiple sclerosis. Can you help me? And it's like, that's not what I'm doing here. Self-decode is not meant to be diagnosing clinical diseases. It's educational purposes, but I could help you use that educational material to enhance your life, but it's not going to tell you if you have cancer or not. They're not going to be commenting on that because it's not clinical grade. That doesn't mean that it's not accurate. Them, 23andMe, Ancestry DNA, they use probe-based sequencing. So they sequence certain areas of the DNA versus whole exome sequencing. They read every single letter. whole exome sequencing is like $1,000+ much more advanced, but eventually that's going to be $200. And that's when I eventually want to pivot. And you could read every single letter, every little micro deletion, every little thing, and just get everything out of that. And that's the ultimate investment in yourself, because your DNA isn't changing. So once you know every letter there, all the answer to your consciousness, your personality, your disease risk, everything, the answers are all right in front of you. It's just, when will science connect all of them?
It's like the manual for your body, right? The operating
Literally,
manual.
basically. Yeah. Yeah. And yes, again, the epigenetics do come into play with that. Absolutely. But I really think the genetic stuff is just overlooked nowadays. And we're learning more and more all the time. And I think a lot of people get scared. They don't want to get sequenced. They don't want to know their risk for things. But I'm going to tell you, what if you knew you could do something about it? If there was a targeted natural supplement that helps with that, why not try and learn about it? Just because, yes, there's things like the BRCA mutations for breast cancer that are like really, really bad. But a lot of these things are association studies. Everyone's heard about red meat is so bad for you. It increases colorectal cancer, but they're just asking how much red meat you eat. They're not controlling for your lifestyle, your cigarette usage, all these other components. So while all these things can be immensely useful, that's again why I focus on vitamin, nutrient, inflammation-based things, not cancer, Alzheimer's. I said, for example, the insulin resistance can be an indicator of what type of Alzheimer's, what's the main mechanism you could be most predisposed to, but I'm not going to be commenting on you're at a higher risk for these things. Help those mechanisms ahead of time, be more preventative about it.
That's awesome. Someone asked, is there genetic testing that isn't shared with the NSA and the government? Because I think that's what like one of the big ones was just bought out by, was it BlackRock? And
yeah,
that's like it's a question. I often wonder if I have a clone running around on Mars or something, you know?
Yeah. So it's one of those things. I know that 23andMe, they have a box you check initially when you first do it, if you want to donate your data anonymously to 23andMe research. And I think a lot of people will check that box and then find out they donated it and be like, they sold my data, but you check the box to let them do that. And also it's anonymized. I know Self-Decode, they say they never sell the data. You can withdraw your data from the database whenever they want. I'm not a data analyst for the company, you know, like no one's going to know for 1,000% sure with all the companies, you know what I mean? But at the same point, I also think that someone sent me something about bioweapon research, personalizing bioweapons based on people and everything, insurance companies jacking things up. We know so little about genetics right now, and science moves fast, but it also moves extremely, extremely slow, especially when it comes to clinical things. I think 2 or 3 generations from now, they may have to worry about their genome being used for insurance rate hikes or this and that. But I just think the pros so far outweigh the maybe potential cons about this, because I'm intimately familiar with how these different things work. I'm a pharmacologist as well, and developing a bioweapon based on this. What are they going to do? Overdose me secretly with COMT inhibitors so I die of tachycardia? You know what I mean? It's like, what's actually, people say they're in development, this and that, but I haven't heard a single proposed mechanism for these things that makes any sense. And I'm not saying that the NSA is going to be releasing these mechanisms out for us to read about, but like, I'm just trying to think as an expert here, what route would they really go with this? I can't really think of much of any. And it's not to say that, you know, I'm infallible, I'm 100% right, but I do know that Self-Decode takes the privacy data very seriously. And that is that's one of the biggest barriers to entry for these things, because people are worried and afraid. Yes, they have solved cold case murders by using genetic data from cousins and relatives of things. Sure, if you consider that a risk where you don't want to personally genetically optimize your health and wellness and minimize chance of chronic diseases down the road, go ahead. You know, I'll take that risk, I guess, with quotes, if you want to call that a risk. So the risk associated with everything you do, walking down the street, every supplement you take, every medication you take, people are afraid of flying in planes. You're so much higher statistically of dying in a car accident on your way to work than you are in a plane. Yet people are much more afraid of planes than flying in cars. So everything imposes some sort of risk. But in short, Self-Decode, they're very proud of not selling their data. I know I forgot which company was bought out by BlackRock. It might have been Ancestry
Mm-hmm.
DNA. But again, everyone automatically assumes they're sharing your information, who you are, and immediately maliciously going against you. I think it would all be anonymized to figure out how prevalent are certain mutations in the population and how prevalent are diseases involving those mutations. Because, they could be using our data to make new therapeutics that actually help us. And you know what? Yes, they make money off those medications. But at the end of the day, we do need big pharma. We would be dying of scraped knees from MRSA infections and staph infections if we didn't have big pharma. Are there shady parts? Absolutely. Do they need to be held accountable for certain things? Absolutely. Are they liars, cheaters, and can make people more sick at times? Yes. But overall, I think they've saved more lives than they're damaged. I mean, I personally left the clinical. I was trained to be a guy doing the mouse experiments. I was injecting mice with tumor cells and stuff for my PhD. I was primed to do R&D for a new pharma immunotherapy drug. And I left that because I didn't really like that whole sector. But that doesn't mean I think it's all bullshit, all garbage. We get rid of them because then we have a lot bigger problems on our hands.
Yeah, that's a great point. You had a question come up for me. What are your thoughts on ancestry testing? Like some people, there's an argument that it's not accurate. Like here's a good example. So I did 2 different websites. I think one was Ancestry and there was another one. Basically, there's a 10% difference in me being Italian. So one said I was 40% Italian, the other one said I was 30%. I'm like, 10% is a pretty big difference, right? I mean, it would be one thing if it's 1 or 2%, but like, do you think ancestry testing is accurate? Being it's possible to figure out like where we've come from that level? Because some people say you need to track your ancestors down. That's the only way to do it.
I mean, I definitely think at the end of the day, the data is the data. I think both of these sequencing, like, it's more so the interpretation of the data itself. It's like tomato, like where, like, I remember I was telling you that I always thought I was 25% German, but then I found out I'm 12.5% Austrian, 12.5% German. But depending who you ask, they're very like closely related there. So it's kind of more so the interpretation. What criteria are you? Certain mutations 100% stem from certain ancient populations that were endemic in certain geographic areas, 100%. But it's more so how you dictate which sub area, which mutations came from. So I personally don't associate too much with the answer. It's the same data that's used. Your DNA is the DNA. You know what I mean? I haven't looked into it too much. I would love to know which types of mutations are they tracking to which original regions. I'm honestly not sure about that. If I knew more about that, I'd be able to answer more absolutely. But I think it's more so minor differences in the rubric of which types of SNPs they're saying come from which areas. What did the other 10% come from the Italian with the other source? Was it somewhere closely geographically to Italy?
I think so. Yeah. And a lot of it's broad. Like it'll just say this region.
Yes.
It contains like 5 or 10 countries.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's very hard to, when people are like on the macro scale of the world, it's very little movement. But when you zoom into these different populations, you immigrate, 20, 30 miles, you could be a country over. So it's like the hard lines of the countries that we drew are so much more recent versus our actual ancestral migratory patterns.
Yeah, that's a good point. Let's see. I know you did a post on this recently, got an overview of cancer. Someone asked tips for preventing rogue cells from mutating and developing metastases.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you could also see a lot of cancer depends on the efficacy or the fidelity of your DNA repair enzymes. So like, for example, very large animals, blue whales, elephants don't really get cancer. They have mutations in their DNA repair pathways that make them hyper efficient at repairing damaged DNA from different lesions. So you can actually have mutations in those DNA repair enzymes. And those are some of the mutations that, for example, my main job, I work for Sema4 clinical personalized genomics company. they will look at that for hereditary cancer screening and say you could be at increased risk. However, but minimizing exposure to things, unprotected. I'm a believer in safe, unprotected sun exposure. I'm definitely super against sunburn itself. That's one of the ways. But at the end of the day, the DNA repair enzymes are going to do what they need to do. But inflammation, a lot of the times, is what feeds these cancer cells. So a lot of the things, I don't want to just regurgitate like everyone said, watch the seed oils or watch sunburn or this or that. But that's kind of a lot of what it is. And being active, doing all the things that, everyone regurgitates and beats to death, because that's a lot of the data that we have right now. And I think just inflammation will feed the cancer. So keeping inflammation levels low. And they're also showing a lot of things based on like your just overall sense of well-being, your sense of community. And that's kind of where the epigenetic side of things comes into play too, because stress can damage DNA. Stress can cause so many physiological changes that lead to disease. I think they say 80-90% of diseases stem from chronic stress. And stress isn't going to be like mutating all the DNA like sunburn would, but that's another instance where epigenetics is important there, because stress drives epigenetic changes.
Yeah, that's great. This is a good one. Is depression related to genetics at all?
Absolutely. And anyone interested in that, I did a live with Nicole's Neuroscience a couple of days ago. We dove really, really deep into that. I'll touch on it briefly here, but we did like, I think, an hour and a half plus just all about genetics and depression. I absolutely think so. And again, going back to the different flavors of diseases, you can have mutations in dopamine metabolism that runs in your family, or you could have mutations in serotonin metabolism in your family. And you could have too low of serotonin, or you could have too low of dopamine. Both different root causes of depression. One person would respond to SSRIs, one person wouldn't. Or you could have mutations that make you very histamine intolerant. And chronically high histamine, chronically high elevated inflammation is also one of the driving hypotheses of depression. So you could either have root genetic cause of lower serotonin, you could have perfectly good inflammatory genetics, but just have a shit lifestyle, and that epigenetically will lower your serotonin. Or you could be predisposed to more inflammation. So a lot of different flavors here. Or you could just have no real huge risk for depression genetically and just be living super horribly, working a shitty job you hate your life, you're in your own head, and you epigenetically give yourself depression. So I think depression can be genetically caused, epigenetically caused. And I also think you could epigenetically aggravate depression in someone that is genetically predisposed to depression. That makes sense. I feel like I'm going in circles here, but
no, that's great. That's awesome. Yeah. This is funny. I think a few people wanted us to debate vitamin C, because I think you made a recent post on vitamin C and iron and its relationship, which I think is a fascinating one, because I feel like there's so much nuance and context there. But we had one question asked: can you ask him about vitamin C 4Xing iron absorption and iron overload? Like, it's my understanding, like, you just shouldn't take ascorbic acid with a steak, right? But like,
yeah, I mean, it just depends what and then also a lot of multivitamins will have, like I think mine has like 180 milligrams of vitamin C in the morning. I have that with a smoothie, and that'll have a lot of fruit high in vitamin C. And it's not that, again, people love just pitting people against each other to get the drama going, and it's like, it just depends on the person. If someone has, there's multiple genes involved with hereditary hemochromatosis. I think like 3 or 4 big ones. You could have someone that has one bad allele in one of those genes. You could have someone that has 2 bad alleles for all of the genes. So it's a huge spectrum for how careful these people need to be around these things. And like, I definitely think if your iron levels are high, if you have chronically high levels and you're genetically predisposed to it, that post was for you. But if you're predisposed to anemia, or if you donate blood and you watch your iron intake and your iron levels are good, then ignore it. I'm just a big fan of everyone always hammers home the benefits of all these supplements, but I want to come out a different angle and say, for certain people, it could be making you worse. So the studies are very clear. Vitamin C, ascorbic acid, definitely does enhance the absorption of dietary iron. But again, it just depends. Are you at risk for iron overload or are you not? So time and place for all of these things.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just talking to my girlfriend yesterday about cereal. I think it was her about like iron. Well, I've been talking about iron for the last few months and like how that really determines, your iron status, like being raised on Honey Nut Cheerios or Lucky Charms.
That was me.
It was you. That's right. Yeah.
All day.
It was. Yeah, that's right. And that's a big consideration, right? Because I remember all throughout elementary school, junior high, and high school, I had iron fortified cereal for that entire time. So that's like a big consideration, I think. Like aside from even hereditary hemochromatosis, it's like that's a boatload of iron coming in.
Exactly. And it's like, this is what I always tell people too, is like I don't mean to fearmonger people, but what is worse than being not supplemented properly when you're an adult? Imagine growing up your entire critical developmental years of your life being bombarded with inflammation, whether it's being fed gluten that you're sensitive to or iron overload during these critical years when your brain is the most plastic and it's literally growing and creating the brain that's going to be you throughout your entire adult life. It's so hugely, hugely important in my opinion, especially during those periods like that. I don't know, I'm throwing numbers out here, but that 15-20% difference in cognition can make all the difference with the traditional schooling program, with where you end up, what you end up doing, the opportunities you get exposed to, just based on some grades for cognitive tests that you may be taking while you're inflamed.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of my schooling, I was frustrated, I think, because I was being taught a lot of BS. Like, I think a lot of it is stuff we have to unlearn. Some of it's valid.
Yeah.
But I had so much brain fog and, barely passed math classes and different classes. And I remember just thinking during that time in the midst of the brain fog, like, I think I'm smarter than this. I think I'm more capable than this. And it's like frustrating because I'm like caught in this little cognitive prison. So it was really cool to discover natural health and nutrition and just all of these things, sunlight and all these things. And it, yeah, just those questions, what you just said about like, if I didn't have all that iron coming in, I always wonder, but I think it worked out in the end. So
yeah, you're doing all right now. Yeah, no, exactly. But how many people were subjected to those things that, aren't happy with what they're doing with their lives right now, and it's, you could help your brain a lot. There's you can do a lot of the brain's been shown to be continually more plastic and able to rewire than we thought into adulthood. But again, I think they say those first 7 years are so hugely important, let alone the first 18. And depending on what you're being fed. And it's also I did food sensitivity testing. I was eating so many foods I was allergic to. And again, I never got hives or any typical histamine anaphylaxis. It all went to my head. I was working with mice every day nearly for 6 years. And at the very end, I got food sensitivity testing and I'm severely allergic to mice. Wow. And I never got hives. I never got anything. I would show up to lab after the gym, eating great, buzzing, feeling good. I would go to lab and most of the time I would end up just feeling like shit, just like kind of working through it. This weird eye sensation that I realize is the histamine response for me. And looking back now, oh yeah, I was around fluorescent lights, which cause inflammation. And it normally wouldn't be that bad. But the first thing I would do, I would go to the basement where the mouse facility is, expose myself to my histamine reaction from the mice. Then I'd be even more triggered by the fluorescent light bulbs upstairs. God knows what chemicals are up there as well. And it's like, I was still able to finish the PhD and get to where I am now. But what would it have been like if I didn't have to work through that inflammation the whole time? And how many other people are subjected to that every single day?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's why I appreciate the parents that are making a really strong effort to create like super healthy babies and children to give them a better start than we had. Yep. I think that's like the next best thing we could start doing.
Like I'm sure you saw the meme of like the ingredients for Ensure, the baby formula. It's just literally just like seed oil, corn oil, like just like sugar, whatever. And it's like, you wonder why ADHD, everything is on the rise right now. It's absolutely crazy. I don't know if you've heard about the theory about, I forgot who it was. I think they were on, might have been on Joe Rogan, saying that like the reason why everyone needs braces now is because we have eat food that's way too soft, and we have all this baby food and everything. And apparently, like in other countries and stuff, where they're feeding them like meat and stuff when they're younger, they're actually chewing the jaw muscles and stuff. The teeth form normal. You don't actually need. I had braces, and I know so many people need braces, and a lot of that they're saying is because of the food we're giving them. And that's aside from even the nutritional content. It's just the palatability and the texture of it. From an evolutionarily biology standpoint, it makes sense. I can't remember the name of it. It might have been one of the Weinsteins that mentioned, I think it was one of the Weinsteins that mentioned it on Joe Rogan about that, and how all the whole dental industry is like shooting that down because that's the case. There goes the whole sector. There goes all their business. So who knows? But I thought that was really interesting, again, tying into the youthful diet and how it affects you later on in life.
Yeah, that is fascinating. Yeah, the dental stuff is something I've been thinking about for months. I just saw a clip a couple weeks ago of what's it, Steve-O from Jackass. I didn't know he got veneers.
Yeah,
with all the stunts he did. But like, I guess a lot of celebrities, they just have those. They got veneers. They have those little spikes for teeth, and then they just put those in, and nobody ever knows. And it looks like they have perfect teeth. And
you can tell with him though. A lot of the veneers are they're too white and too shiny. I feel like you can tell, but it doesn't look bad. But like I remember I saw Steve-O recently, and I was like, those are definitely veneers. Then I saw later on that it freaks me out.
Yeah. This is a good one. Specific amino acids for depression and anxiety. I know you've talked about L-theanine before, right?
Yeah. So amino acid wise, again, it depends on your genetics, what you need. So tryptophan hydroxylase is the enzyme that converts L-tryptophan into 5-HTP, which then gets converted to serotonin. And that's mutated in a lot of people. I have one bad copy of that gene. I don't really struggle with depression per se, but anxiety, yes. But it depends. Like someone that has 2 mutations in that, I think that while they're also one of the prime candidates for SSRIs because they just don't produce enough serotonin, why not have them supplement with 5-HTP directly? And I don't suggest supplementing with isolated amino acids for neurotransmitters chronically unless you genetically need it. Because if you flood your body with tryptophan, that's going to outcompete other amino acids in your diet for transport into the brain. I know they did studies that branching amino acids for weightlifting can actually cause minor depression if used chronically because, again, you're going to be flooding it with all this leucine, valine, isoleucine, and you're not going to be getting the tryptophan into your brain that you need. However, if I'm feeling down, just run down and stuff, I'll take 500 milligrams of gram of L-tryptophan one night, and I feel better. I feel good. I don't take it all the time. If I need a little boost, it works for me. Tyrosine is a good one for dopamine levels. With anxiety, though, I think that there's 2 different types of anxiety. There's hyperdopaminergic and hypodopaminergic. So either you have, I feel like if you have, I remember during my PhD, there were times I was just so anxious, paralysis by analysis, not knowing what to do, imposter syndrome. I'd supplement with L-tyrosine. I felt so much better. I believe that I was just burnt out. My catecholamines were low. I was anxious because I had the inability to act. I had no self-confidence. I couldn't take one step forward with anything because I was so not confident in myself. Versus you have the hyperdopaminergic anxiety or hypercatecholinergic, where you have too much of these things. And that's like me after I got out of that rut and managed my stress through other ways. If I take tyrosine now, most of the time I'll end up super anxious because of my COMT mutation. So I'll metabolize those extra catecholamines much slower. But regarding the anxiety, the amino acids, L-theanine is a great one to help lower stress, lower cortisol. And that also brings up stuff like GABA as well. You can also have mutations in GABA receptors. So that would mean that your GABA receptors don't transduce the signaling as well when GABA binds that, which means your brain is not as sensitive to the calming effects of GABA. What could you do? Something like lemon balm extract blocks the degradation of GABA. So if you're less sensitive to your homeostatic endogenous GABA production, minorly boost up your GABA by preventing the degradation to hit those receptors more and try to get more calming effects down the road. But you can experiment with these things, but I would definitely not experiment. Do not experiment with tryptophan if you're on SSRIs. Do not experiment. If you read all these supplements, a lot of pre-workouts have tyrosine too. They say do not take with any MAOIs. And guess what's an MAOI? Piperine in your multivitamin. So kind of coming full circle here, I can handle low-dose L-tyrosine. I can handle low-dose MAOI. I am a fucking mess if I combine low-dose tyrosine with low-dose MAOI, because I'm going to be flooding extra precursors and also blocking the degradation of those extra precursors. So a double whammy, and I'll be absolutely tweaking out. So you got to understand the mechanisms here and the time and place for them.
Yeah, I think you described it as you were like super snappy with your wife.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Wanted to be by yourself.
I'll be so focused on what I'm doing that if I get derailed by something, I just get agitated about it. I'm like, oh, I got to go do this now. I get very short and snippy with things. And then later on in the day, once it wears off, I take CBD or something, I reflect back and I'm like, damn, I was kind of a dick. You know, it did make me more agitated. But again, I'm also homozygous slow COMT, which means I'm the most susceptible to that. If there's someone with a normal COMT mutation, that could help them with their ADD or ADHD, because they may, whether it's genetically or epigenetically, they may have lower catecholamine levels than what they need. So taking tyrosine may boost them up right away. But people also need to be aware, if you take L-tyrosine to boost yourself up, a lot of pre-workouts, people get addicted to them because they're basically like minor ADHD drugs. Tyrosine is a natural, mild ADHD drug. Depending on the dose, it's safe to take. But if you have a dotted line of what your normal physiological dopamine is, and you're lower, the higher you overshoot over your normal levels where you should be, you're going to be down-regulating dopamine receptors in your brain, because your brain, what goes up must come down. It's very, very tightly regulated. So it's like, if I stim myself up a couple of days, crush a few days of work, take some Alcar, maybe some tyrosine, MAOIs, that fourth day I stop, I'm very sensitive. I'm very in tune with my mind and my body, but like I'll notice by slight depression, I mean very, very slight. I don't mean I'm down in the dumps at all, but like what goes up must come down. And when you're biohacking doing these things, be aware of that. It doesn't mean don't do it, because try to kick an SSRI cold turkey. You'll be in way worse shape than trying to stop your piperine you've been taking for a week straight. But that's also why I suggest cycling these different things, different mechanisms of things. MAOI, come off a little bit. Maybe some tyrosine, come off a little bit. Maybe some racetam cholinergics, come off a little bit, and slowly cycle these things.
I'm curious, have you ever looked at Ray Peat stuff, Tyler, on serotonin and dopamine? But he has like multiple articles on tryptophan and serotonin, and he's really against it, saying it's a stress hormone, and basically it's not what they told us it was, and it's not a happy hormone. But I'm just wondering how much context is involved there, like you said, with the genes mutation.
Exactly. I haven't. I know Pedro's huge on Ray Peat. I've been meaning to read up on him. And again, I agree with what a lot of these different people are saying. It's just the nuanced context of it all. If someone's been depressed their whole life and it runs in their family and they have homozygous TPH2 mutations, tell me what else you're going to do to help them. If you're not going to give them tryptophan or tryptophan wouldn't make sense because the enzyme that converts it isn't functional. Not that it's 0% functional, but it's like they say 80, 90% non-functional. If you don't want to give them direct 5-HTP, you better be giving them St. John's wort or Kava or some natural SSRI or maybe a natural MAOI. If you don't want to boost up the precursor, then you should slow the degradation. And I'm fine with that. But saying that no one needs that, then what else are you going to do for these people that just don't make enough serotonin? Like I personally do, I lean more towards preventing degradation over precursor supplementation, because tryptophan, 5-HTP, they also get converted into melatonin and things as well. And it's like, it depends on the person always. But I do think that preventing degradation is a little more targeted, because you're only preventing the degradation of serotonin. You're also not affecting melatonin and all these other pathways as well. But I think some people, tryptophan can be bad. It can make some people very bland and blank. But again, it's similar symptoms to what taking SSRIs can be like. And what does that mean? That's excess serotonin syndrome. I remember I did that live with Pedro. Everyone was like, excess serotonin is bad. What are you talking about? I'm not saying get excess serotonin. I'm saying repair your deficit, get back to normal. So I think it's just time and place based on the individual genetics. And if you're not going to give them a precursor, what are you going to do to correct the serotonin? Try the sunlight, try the healthy relationship, try the healthy diet, sure. But the healthy diet, how much of that is just increasing the tryptophan from the whole food source? Is he against high tryptophan food sources or just isolated tryptophan?
Yeah, I think he emphasizes dairy over muscle meats, but I thought dairy has a good amount of tryptophan in it.
Yeah, I believe it does.
Yeah, but it's interesting, all these little things, because I feel like there's so much nuance and context to be discussed. Like my last guest, John, he was talking about how he takes aspirin powder to boost CO2 in his body, and how it's better than nitric oxide for the pump, and he notices it before the gym.
I would think that anti-inflammatory would also blunt the anabolic inflammatory response.
Yeah, I don't know. He's jacked, but
yeah, I mean, I take vitamin C with my the amount of vitamin C I take has been shown to blunt muscle growth, and I'm still growing muscle. So it's definitely not like super black and white like that. But like, yeah, like that aspirin type thing, like I didn't get this. My brother has mutations in the factor V clotting cascade. So he started baby aspirin. And what do you know? My mom has that. My mom's mom died of a stroke. Her mom died of a pulmonary embolism. Her mom's mom died of a pulmonary embolism. So it's like you trace this back, and like imagine knowing you're predisposed to strokes and blood clots and knowing that you should be on the baby aspirin throughout your whole life. That's a whole other portion of this about knowing if you're predisposed. If you're predisposed to colon cancer that runs in your family, genetically, you can sometimes get insurance to cover that and get screened more frequently. So imagine knowing the top 3 mechanisms you're most likely to die or get chronic disease from. And imagine knowing to mitigate those top 3 right out of the gate. Obviously, nothing here is guaranteed. There's risks with everything. There's no magic bullet cure-all to make you live forever. But just knowing those things can really help. The fact you said about the aspirin, that's interesting. Using that as a vasodilator, like pump type thing. That's pretty interesting. Does that affect like PDE or anything? Because I know that I personally tried Viagra, low dose Viagra years ago for the pump, and that worked really, really good. Does it work? Does it affect PDEs? Like how would that affect the blood flow? Does it affect nitric oxide, like the NOS enzymes?
So Ray Peat's very anti-nitric oxide. I always, it's not about playing devil's advocate or stirring the pot. I just questioning things, questioning everything.
Yes, always.
And Ray Peat's been really popular, especially the last 2 years. I think I had a big part to play in that with this podcast and just resharing his work. But I don't think any one person's infallible or has all the answers. And I was just
that's a great perspective.
Breaking down their points. And yeah, he's very nitric oxide is harmful, in excess, and carbon dioxide or CO2 does what nitric oxide does, but safer and better. And I wonder if there's a role for nitric oxide, because I don't know. There's somewhere in between, taking nitric oxide, releasing tablets, and thinking it's evil. Like there's a balance somewhere.
Yeah, I personally take a gram of agmatine sulfate before I work out every day, and I love it. I notice they have those expensive, huge pump blend complex things, and you know what? I just tried 1 gram of agmatine. It's dirt cheap. It works enough for me. I don't need to be bursting at the seams, veiny all the time. And I'm wondering, does Ray Peat have any stances on mTOR pathways? Is that nitric oxide related to the mTOR longevity type thing?
Yeah, his views on longevity. I mean, he says a lot of people like David Sinclair says we want to activate SIRT1.
Yeah, and minimize mTOR.
He's we want to shut down SIRT1, which is what niacinamide does. So it's kind of an opposite perspective from Sinclair. And
interesting.
I mean, I do question resveratrol. I think that's one of the things he's spot on about.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the, I know the mTOR theory too. It's at what point is the opportunity cost? I know I was looking into recently I'm a huge air fryer guy. A lot of air fryers have Teflon. I got to look into mine, but it's one of those things that if I shave off 5 months off my life by using the air fryer every day, if I save way more than 5 months of my time using the air fryer, is it really that, I feel like some people sometimes get so caught up in maximizing longevity, but it's like, if it's helping things on the front end, are you really at that much of a net loss if it's saving that much time?
Right. And you're probably good because you're taking Shilajit. I think I just saw a post on carbon 60 or C60, and I'm like,
yeah,
do you guys know Shilajit contains, it's black because it's carbon, so it's like, I don't know. I think
I've been loving Shilajit. I switched to the resin I told you, and I've been, but I take that in the morning, and I don't need my coffee right away. Like
awesome.
I'm rushing the gym, so I have it, but like I've been really, really, really impressed by that for sure. I switched from, I think I told you, I used to take the Primavera capsules that were used for the clinical studies, and then I switched to the resin, and now I was like, wow, this is way different. I'm only taking like 200-ish milligrams, and I had to lower my caffeine dose like significantly because it was stimming me up so much. And then I hear people taking like 500 milligrams to a gram, and I'm like, sure, I haven't even experimented with it because I've been feeling so good.
That's awesome. Yeah, I take 1,000 milligrams a day with my coffee, and I feel great. And Indian Viagra, that's one name for it.
Interesting. I haven't heard that. I've heard the, what is it, Destroyer of Gods or whatever, but I haven't heard the Indian Viagra. That's funny.
Conqueror of Mountains, yeah.
Oh yeah, Conqueror of Mountains. Yeah.
This is a good question. Is there a genetic basis for difficulty in gaining weight? It's like hard gainers, I guess, or...
Yeah, so I would think that I'm honestly not too much of a nutrition expert. However, I would definitely say that mutations in glucose metabolism, so how insulin sensitive you are. I'm sure if you gave me a day, I could find all these different, there's so much genetic information about all these different genes and mutations that affect fat metabolism, fat transport, glucose transporters, glucose uptake, glycogen storage, like all these different things. If there's no genetic basis for hard gainers, then why are they hard gainers? Is it really all just epigenetically based, all nurture based that decides that? I would think that's especially something that's definitely genetic based, but that's one of the areas. Again, I was telling you this before I think we started recording. What I'm trying to do is not sector or health ailment like specific. I'm trying to really learn about all these different things at once, and it's such an incredibly large amount of information. I come from the mood regulation side of things, methylation, inflammation, but like there's still the whole nutritional side of things I want to learn more about and how that all works. So sadly, I don't have a list of specific genes if you have this or that, but I do know that like Decode does have an overweight like report and risk score. They have a hyperglycemia, hypoglycemia. So they do have some nutritional stuff on there, and they would have some genes there, but I'm not too well versed enough to give you a whole list of different things. I know there's genes that dictate how much dopamine you dump based on food responses. And that's heavily linked to obesity, which is interesting because people that are obese, they get higher dopamine dump from food. So they get a more pleasure response versus someone that's not obese or doesn't have that gene. Then you also got to think, does having that gene and you're not obese, why aren't you obese? Is it like will over genetics? It's just every time I turn, I feel like it's a whole new can of worms just opening, and I know absolutely nothing about everything. I swear.
That sounds great.
Learning as I go, but it's just so much stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Kind of circling back. This is a really interesting one. So vitamin D, which I know you've looked into quite a bit, and that's another like really heated topic that, people are always trying to debate me because I don't think supplementation's necessary overall. I mean, like isolated, like I think if you need to supplement cod liver oil because it's balanced. But basically this person's asking double VDR mutation and what are the implications of that on vitamin D supplementation?
Yeah. So I think I have heterozygous for the two different genes involved with that. Mm-hmm. And that would mean that your cells, the nuclear receptors, are less responsive, which would mean that you would need higher levels of vitamin D than normal in order to reach the normal amount of vitamin D gene stimulation. Now, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying, that, saying that you need to take excessive amounts of vitamin D to get there. Like, I'm going to take what you're saying. into account too, because I've been reading more about the hypercalcification part as well, which is absolutely true. And it's one of those things, a lot of the things that I think about are what outweighs what. You may be fixing one targeted mutation, but you may be fixing some ailments, but then you may be increasing risk for other types of ailments. So how do you really cover all of the bases there? But again, in theory, would say that you need extra vitamin D levels. So I think they say 50 to 70 nanograms per deciliter is the healthy range. I'm throwing numbers out there, but you may need 90 or 100 to reach whatever the gene stimulation, the epigenetic gene stimulation is of vitamin D to reach that normal amount of gene stimulation, because the cells are less, kind of what I said earlier about the GABA receptor mutations. You're less responsive to the calming effects of GABA. You're less responsive to the epigenetic changes of vitamin D.
Wow.
But how much to take and stuff, I'm not exact. That's one of those things that it's so nuanced thinking, forward thinking. There's no real hardcore answers for that.
Yeah. I have a 311 nanometer light behind me here. It's UVA and UVB combination. And I've had the Spur-T, I have a stand-up one. I've had a million of them. It's an exaggeration. I've had a lot of UV light devices because I'm up here in a northern latitude. And it's been fun with me to play with light therapy devices. And I wonder, someone with those mutations, if they would benefit more, especially if they live somewhere like I do in North Idaho, from, using a UV light regularly. And I wonder, there'd be a fun experiment, if that would be enough, someone with, say, double VDR mutations to just, use a UV light daily if they have
yes.
a real winner like I do,
Yes. And you also got to remember too, I think it was DHC7, whatever the enzyme is that's triggered by UV radiation to actually start the activation cascade. I have homozygous mutations in that. So I would not respond. So you have dual VDR mutations and dual upstream mutations for the activation. In theory, you really wouldn't respond very well at all to the UV light. But if someone didn't have those mutations and they had the VDR mutation, then that could be, a possible route for them to go. And regarding the cod liver oil, what's the dosage of cod liver oil for what's a standard dosage and how much vitamin D is in that?
Yeah, I think it has up to 10 times the amount of vitamin A to vitamin D, so that you can get either a liquid or capsule. And the liquid has just burned my throat so many times. It's it's like drinking olive oil. It's extra virgin. And it has a trace amount of rosemary, which if that hits the wrong part of your throat, to me, it just burns for 10 minutes. It's really uncomfortable. Oof. So long story short, I moved back to the capsules. A dose, serving size is 3 capsules. And I think it's about 1,300 IU of vitamin A. And then I think the vitamin D in that dose would be, 200 or something like that. But usually I'll take 3 to 4 times that dose if I'm,
okay.
Because
you're also in the northern latitude too.
Right. And I'm very aware that these things are stored. And I think that's, the vitamin A toxicity camp, that's their big argument is, vitamin A is stored for years and years. And so how do you know, that you don't have a ton of it already in your liver or your tissues? Did they look at it as more of a toxin than a vitamin? I think it's a true vitamin. I'm not sold that it's a toxin.
The dosage makes the poison.
Right. Yeah. And
most things, at least.
And on my self-decode, it said I have I have increased vitamin A requirement, or I'm more at a risk of being deficient in vitamin A.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because I've had acne and eczema my whole life and skin issues, and that's vitamin A deficiency largely.
That's so interesting between that and then the higher calcium too. You've ironically been doing exactly what you should be doing based on your genetics all along.
And the fatty liver I have increased risk for, which vitamin E protects against fatty liver. I think vitamin A too. There's multiple things that help with that. But yeah, and caffeine helps fatty liver.
I'm a big caffeine guy. People love bashing caffeine, and I think it has a lot of protective effects on things. Just don't fry your adrenals. Don't go crazy with it. I always tell people, very few people, well, it's also obviously depends on your CYP1A2 genotype, but I hear people don't eat 800 milligrams of caffeine. It's inflammation will mask a lot of stimulatory effects. I always tell people, if you're feeling shot and just not good, take 2 ibuprofen. If you feel better, you don't need a PhD in pharmacology to notice. If an anti-inflammatory made you feel better, that means inflammation is making you feel like shit. And then that's when you start, all right, what source of inflammation? And that's when the hard part starts. But coffee too, I kind of just ditch. I have some espresso in the morning just because, I mean, I hate to admit it, but I was having half a Rain energy drink every day for a couple of months. It really made me feel good. And I switched back to espresso, but coffee is also very, very high in histamine. I have an HNMT mutation. So I used to have really bad allergies. I've gotten that in check now. But coffee can also aggravate histamine in people. And the other day I think I told you through a DM, I realized apple cider vinegar is very high in histamine as well. And I would get that weird eye sensation I would get after going to the mouse room during my PhD. And what do you know? I'm allergic to mice and I'm sensitive to histamine. And I had coffee and apple cider vinegar in the morning. I used to think it was a blood sugar drop too much from the apple cider vinegar, but I'm barely having any. I'm having like 80 grams of carbs, barely any apple cider vinegar. It was the histamine response. And I learned that a couple of weeks ago. So I'm learning new stuff as I'm going literally every day.
That's a good sign that, yeah, you're still open to learning.
Absolutely.
With how much you know. Yeah, a guest I had on recently, Andra, she posted about histidine recently. She's been big into that amino acid. And it's a amino acid found in kidney, like desiccated kidney or the organ meat. So it's helpful for people with allergies. But what I found interesting is she was saying that if your body has a histamine response and it's trying to make histamine and you're deficient in histidine, which is the precursor, that's like an additional stressor, which I never considered.
Interesting. I've never heard of that. That's super interesting.
Mm-hmm. So that creates like another set of problems. I think there's other conditions like that too. Like if you don't have the precursor to make, cortisol or adrenaline. Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting, actually. Histidine. I'll look that up after this.
Mm-hmm. This is a big can of worms, but maybe you can short answer.
Here we go.
So germ versus terrain theory, someone asked about, because I feel like this has turned into like a debate where people are trying to prove, they've never isolated a virus is a big one. And like, for me, this just turns into like, what does it matter? Because obviously people are getting something like I had COVID twice this year. I know it was because it was never like any cold or flu I ever had. And when someone says that, how do you know it was COVID? I get a gaslighting vibe because I know that it was. I've never lost my taste and smell in my life ever for 1 to 2 hours, ever, not once. And it happened during this time. And I had all the symptoms, body aches. I had never experienced that before. So whether it's a bioweapon or, I think it's just really interesting. This whole argument has been raging, and I get it. People are pissed from the lockdowns and stuff. So it's just become emotional. I think it's like, it's become really a psychological warfare to like divide us and make us argue more, which I don't know if we could argue any more than we already are.
No, exactly. Yeah. No. And I think I remember seeing Pedro debated some of the, I'm trying to remember the germ versus terrain. Can you summarize real quick which of the two? I forgot which one was what.
Well, the terrain theory people, they argue against Béchamp. What's it, Béchamp versus Pasteur? Because Louis Pasteur was the guy that, I guess, quote, invented the germ theory. And
that's where you want to eradicate all germs. And then the terrain is more so the body, when it's healthy, can work through those things.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely more on the terrain theory side of things. I know people, the virus deniers, I remember I saw Pedro debating them, and they're saying that just because you need to do certain technological techniques in order to visualize the virus, and then they say you want to just take the virus and put it there and visualize it, but they don't understand. Like, my lab also was a virology lab, and it's the isolation of exosomes are very similar to the isolation of viruses. They're both the same size, and you can't just get a piece of spit and isolate that. You lose so much sample. You need to concentrate it. You would need buckets of spit in order to concentrate it, in order to view it. like just how the technological workflow works. But then they'll say, oh no, like you don't know what's in the tube, or you don't know, like you just take the spit and visualize it. And it's like, you haven't walked the walk. You don't understand how the processes work of isolating these different things. So like, yeah, I totally think viruses exist. Like and I definitely think that, again, with this genetic sequencing thing too, imagine knowing, like, there's genes that are involved with viral replication, host genes, and there's mutations in those. So you could know, I think there's certain SNPs that are involved with like 8-fold less HIV viral load just because of the host machinery that is used by the viruses. And there's different types of host machinery genes that are used for different types of viruses. So you could predict your susceptibility to different types of viral infections based on your genetics.
Wow.
I don't know if that fully answered the question, but I definitely think the body, when working optimally, can fight off most things. Does that mean that antibiotics have no place in medicine? Absolutely not. I feel like I tend to stay away from two of the extremes. I feel like the more extreme you get on either side, it's dangerous, whether it's politics or viruses or whatever. The further extreme people get on either side, the more they think they're absolutely correct. And you would think the more out there your ideas are, the more extreme you are. Like, you should also be more open to, maybe you're only like 70% correct because your idea is so extreme. Like, the possibility that it's all right is getting exponentially smaller the more extreme you go. And there's nothing wrong with being 70, 80% right. People just hate being 1% wrong, but we clearly sound like we're in the same camp. I love being wrong because I'm that much closer to getting to the truth about things.
I love it. Yeah, that's well said. This is kind of circling back to what you said about MTHFR, but what supplements should someone take if they have MTHFR? You said there's other ones involved. Like, if someone has that mutation, they know they have an MTHFR mutation, and they just start playing with methyl B12. You're saying that could potentially have downsides, right? What you're saying earlier.
Yeah, so it depends. I know that, like, I had the MTHFR, COMT mutations make you much less tolerable of methyl donors. So directly methylated B12, methylfolate, much higher chance of anxiety, so higher catecholamine levels, and chronically elevated catecholamine levels can actually damage DNA over time. So I definitely think, especially a lot of these sequencing places now, if you check MTHFR, your COMT genotype is also probably there as well. So you could figure out which type. I know there's the regular B12, methyl B12, hydroxyl B12, adenosyl B12. I think there's another type, but yeah, like I said before, I feel so much better energized, but I don't feel like I'm rushing to do things anymore. Like, I could rush if I want to, but I felt very on the clock all the time with the methyl B12. I took that for a while now. And there's different, like the MTRR mutation, you have reduced ability to turn homocysteine into L-methionine. So you're going to have higher homocysteine levels, which can be addressed through other methylation proteins, but you're also going to have a lack of L-methionine, which is involved in many other processes as well. So it depends on which type of, just 20% battery, type of genetic mutation you have. But a methyl B12 thing definitely makes sense, but you also got to pay attention to the dosage of these things, because I think the B12, the methyl B complex I was taking, it had like, I think 70, 80,000% of the daily dose of methyl B12. And you got to pay attention because you may not need all of that. And also, I also have a mutation in the FUT2 gene, which means I absorb B12 intestinally less, which means if I'm taking oral B12, I may not be, even if it's methyl or not, I'm not going to be absorbing it as much. So you may need a higher dose. You may get anxious, need to lower the dose. The issue may be the methyl B12 due to your COMT mutation, or you may just have enough B12. And it's not to say that everyone with an MTHFR mutation will instantly feel better and not have any side effects from a methyl B vitamin. But you just got to be paying attention to these things. And again, knowing what other genes involved in methylation may be disruptive, because I think methylation issues underlie a lot of anxiety and depression because they're upstream of neurotransmitter production. So you may have decreased serotonin because the methylation is messed up upstream, but the enzyme that makes serotonin may be totally fine. So those people may feel better taking 5-HTP or an MAOI, but like there's numerous ways to skin a cat here. You get what I'm saying? Like you have methylation mechanisms, you have tryptophan conversion mechanisms, you have serotonin degradation mechanisms. So someone with low serotonin, they can feel better on all these different modalities, but you also may be opening yourself up to more subtle side effects chronically down the road. And that's exactly why I'm so passionate about getting sequenced to find out the root cause of these things, because you may not need the MAOI. That could also be affecting your histamine metabolism. If you're histamine intolerant, you may feel better on it or you may feel worse. But if you know you have methylation issues and fix that upstream, that could be the cascading effect downstream that fixes so many of your issues. Because methylation has been linked to so many things: cancer, miscarriages, anxiety, depression, insomnia, so many different things.
Wow. That's incredible. If just making these little changes just affected someone's anxiety, depression, like you said, insomnia, like that could get them out of life situations, like a crappy environment or a job or relationship, and really change their life. Because I think people tend to just look at these things as, oh, it's just mechanistic and, you know, it's just getting really sciencey and like too detailed. But like making these, like being aware of this stuff could totally change someone's life, right? And
absolutely. And I've had several people that have been on anxiety, depression medications their whole life, and they take the methyl B vitamin. They're homozygous. Most of these people are homozygous MTHFR because there's C677T and I think A129C. So there's two main mutations in MTHFR. The C677T is the one that directly affects homocysteine levels. The other one isn't normally an issue unless it's also with the other mutation, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So I'm heterozygous for each of them. And the people I've seen that have the worst phenotypes are homozygous for the C677T. And it's one of those things, and this is why I love genetics so much. It's so black and white with a lot of these things and binary. They've been deprived of methylation their entire lives. So you supply them those methyl donors, and it's literally within hours, minutes, they're just like, oh my God, I feel like the voices in my head feel like I don't have those intrusive thoughts, this and that. And I'm going on the record now, I'm not telling everyone, I'm not going to turn to one of the people that sells their mantra that it fixes everyone with everything. I'm not going to be saying that getting sequence will fix all of your issues. But what I'm saying is, you could be, even if, let's say you have a lot of trauma, epigenetic dysregulation, what if personalized vitamin recommendations, it's low-hanging fruit. So you do that first. And what if you're 20, 30% better overnight? You still got the 70% to go, but people that are living hell every day, they would love 30% improvement. And like you said, fixing that one mechanism that's wrong, it seems nitty gritty, but if that mechanism is wrong, it's going to mess up the whole puzzle. And that boost can give someone like the energy and the wherewithal to get out of those abusive relationships or get out of that toxic job. People need that boost to initially just get the inertia going. It's always harder to get things moving than it is to keep it moving. That's just laws of physics. I think that holds true with just mood, behavior, and personality as well. You could get that boost. People don't have energy to go to the gym. The gym gives me more energy when I go. But if you have no energy to even go to the gym because you have methylation issues, you don't have enough catecholamines, that can help you get the energy to say, hey, I want to go for my 20-minute walk 3 times a week. And that will cause all the other BDNF, nitric oxide, all the other epigenetic good things that all can funnel down into really changing your life around.
That was awesome. That's great. Did you ever look into Abram Hoffer, Tyler? Because I was listening to an old video of him.
I'm going to write down his name right now. Abram
Hoffer. He was big into LSD, and I think he might have even worked with the CIA. But basically, he was into mega vitamin therapy. And I was listening to him a couple months ago, and he used high dose niacin for schizophrenia. And
interesting.
He was saying he saw, this girl have the voices in her head go away just from taking niacin every day for, I think, a week or two. But it was like pretty fast acting. So it's
I know that doesn't that boost NMN or NAD downstream as well? Because I know that's one of the theories for. And again, this is what's interesting to me too. Again, the different flavors, I think reduce neuroplasticity. mutations in neural cell adhesion proteins, or reductions in NAD. All these things have different root genetic causes, and that's again why some people respond to things, some people don't. But continue what you were saying.
Yeah, no, totally. That's exactly right. And yeah, I know there are some people out there saying, thiamine for everybody. Everyone needs B1 if they have anxiety or whatever, B2 or B3.
So are you familiar with sulbutamine?
Mm-mm.
Sulbutamine is a thiamine vitamin B1 derivative that has very, very high blood-brain barrier permeability. I got some from Nootropics Depot, tried microdosing it, and I was a fucking mess.
Wow.
Way, way too much energy. But hey, some people, if they have mutations in that metabolism, it could work great for them, And it's like, I think something else worth mentioning is for these clinical trials, for all these different drugs and stuff, like, and everyone's talking about that new paper about the serotonin not involved in depression, this and that. But like, imagine stratifying all these different treatments by genotypes. So how many people are you giving SSRIs that don't have mutations in serotonin pathways? Of course, they're not going to respond. They have deficits in neuroplasticity pathways, whether that's, I have a mutation in the BDNF gene. So I've reduced neuroplasticity genetically to begin with, but chronic stress also lowers BDNF. So that's why I said you could either have genetic root cause or epigenetics that lower the same thing overall. I do a lot of things that boost my plasticity, magnesium, like getting outside of the sun. A lot of these things help with that. But all these different clinical trials for different drugs, like especially with mood disorders, believe it or not, I think that mood disorders, mood regulation is surprisingly simple versus something like inflammation. Immunology, graduate immunology was by far the most complex course I took. There's so many different converging pathways, but depression, neurotransmitters, neurotrophins, and inflammation, I'm not saying, I'm an expert, mastered mood disorders by any means, but from what I've seen working with people, it's like you have a mutation in serotonin metabolism. Let's give you a natural MAOI, and most people end up doing well on that, or if it's, or even if it's something like the COMT. Let's say you have a normal COMT enzyme, and let's say you just can't focus at all. Even though, so with COMT, it's either normal or fast. There's no slow genotype. Not every gene has slow, intermediate, fast. Let's say you have a normal COMT enzyme and you want to focus more. I could suggest something like rutin or quercetin or green tea extract. All of these are natural COMT inhibitors. You're going to be making it from normal to slower, but you're not going to be as sensitive to the anxiety effects. If I take them, mine's already 4 times slower. I cannot tolerate them. But based on the dose, even though your enzyme isn't slow, you can still boost yourself up. Again, kind of what I said before, even if you don't genetically need it, I can know that you're genetically less likely for side effects. So I would still say, hey, get it for $10 off Vitamin Shop and try it out and see how it goes. Worst case scenario, you're too anxious on it. Open up the cap, deal with the taste, and take half of a dose. If it's still too much, then maybe it's not for you. Maybe try drinking green tea and not concentrated. Like there's a lot of spectrums of modalities you could do these things. Because kind of what we've said a while ago, natural supplements, a lot of them are 10x concentrated blends or chemically modified curcumin that has 3,000% more absorption than normal curcumin and piperine. And it's like, I took one of those. I was so anxious because yes, had no headaches, super clear-minded. I had 3,000% more anti-inflammatory effects. Great. But what else did I have? 3,000% more MAOI activity. And guess who can't tolerate 3,000% boosted MAOIs? The guy with 2 slow COMT alleles.
Wow. That's awesome. Let's do one more here, Tyler. This is a
Sure.
kind of a good one to end on. Can we control and change the genetics that are passed down through the generations?
So genetics wise, no, but a really emerging, there's no way to change. You get what you get genome wise. However, the methylation patterns have been shown to be passed down generations. Obesity, part of it genetically runs in families, but also the methylation patterns. They've done studies that exposing male mice to marijuana alters the epigenetics, so the methylation of the DNA of the sperm DNA, which can then make the offspring more predisposed to ADHD, schizophrenia, neurological disorders. And I think that's true with like basically all drugs that, like when I start trying to have a family, I'm going cold turkey on cannabis, booze, for everything. I'm not, like give yourself some time to, the epigenetics do alter over time, but the time of conception especially is super, super important. And that's what makes me wonder about all the things we put in our bodies about affecting the epigenetics of this egg as well. A lot of the research has been on the sperm. It's a lot more easy to study. It's easily accessible, but you can control. Living a healthy, fulfilling life can absolutely give your offspring a higher, I guess, propensity to have a healthy, fulfilling life. If you're very inflamed your whole life, that also changes your epigenetics. If you're obese, that changes your epigenetics, and that can get passed on. That's not a death sentence. It's not a sentence to be, Albert Einstein, but you can't control the spelling of the DNA, but you can control the epigenetics that are getting passed on during fertilization of the zygote to the offspring.
Wow, that's awesome. Do you have a website, Tyler, that people can go to yet, or?
No website yet. I'm planning on working on that, but as of right now, Dr. Tyler Panzner, Panzner, is my Instagram tag. I'm also on TikTok as well. I haven't been that active on that, trying to get some stuff up on there. But yeah, everyone can find me on there. Feel free to reach out. Any questions about how to get sequenced, to work with my first couple of clients, and been going great so far. Happy to do discovery calls. Anyone has questions, which type of plan or route they want to go. But yeah, really looking forward to seeing where my journey goes with this, and seeing, I'm really not sure, how deep does this really go, especially with the data available. And as science advances, how deep, how much can we really explain with genetics? And more importantly, how many of these genetic dysregulations can be remedied through natural holistic solutions?
Yeah, it's really exciting. Like you said, it's around 80,000 SNPs that it shows.
No, 83 million.
Oh, 83 million. Okay.
Yeah, they're going through
millions more than 1,000. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of information. And, I always tell people too, if you're one of the, so there's, people can work with me directly right away as a client, but if you're someone that's an inquisitive biohacker about your health, I suggest getting a subscription. Reach out if you have questions about it. Matt got his. There's information on there. And if you're inquisitive about it, you just don't want to be told what to do, you want to learn, it's so helpful. You get discounted blood work. If you have a subscription, you can order your own blood work, blood panels for things at a discounted rate. You also get access to Self-Hack, which is a whole resource where you can look up a gene or a mutation. It'll have articles about all peer-reviewed studies right there, written easy to understand about how these things work, and try to break it down as easy as possible. I'm here if there's more, discussion needed, but I think Self-Decode does a great job for a basic primer, because who knows? You may do Self-Decode to get the subscription and make some tweaks. You may feel as good as you want to feel, and you may not need an additional consultation for things, or you may, but different ways to do it. But yeah, find me on Instagram. I'd be happy to connect with everybody.
Awesome. And your code for that is it Dr. Panzer?
Yeah, Dr. Panz. So DRPANZ. I also have a link in my bio on my Instagram about that takes you to the site.
Cool. Yeah, I'll put that in the show notes so people can check that out. And I think it's definitely worth doing, especially if you already have your DNA raw data. It's like, why not check it out?
I think it's for, with the code, the 1 year subscriptions, like I think 80-ish, and then the lifetime's $250 with the code. And then the DNA kit is $100, which is the cheapest one I've seen. Most of them are like $150, $200. So if you already have DNA, you're talking as little as $80 just to see what it's like, or do the lifetime. But yeah, I'm really excited with it. Excited to see where they go with it.
Right on. Well, thanks, Tyler. This was a lot of fun. I learned a lot. And yeah, stick around to close out the show. Appreciate you coming on.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, man. I had a blast.
That is all for today's show. This was a fun one for me to do because the last 13 years I've noticed a lot of talk about epigenetics, but not a lot of talk about genetics. And I appreciate that Tyler's focusing on it and sharing how important it is, because I think it does matter. And Tyler's a self-decode practitioner. And I've heard about this website years ago where you can plug in your DNA text file, whether it's from 23andMe or a website like that. But what's unique is it will analyze, as Tyler said, 83 million SNPs, which are quite a lot, using artificial intelligence algorithms. And you could figure out whether you have, like in my case, it says increased need for iodine, lower gut microbiome diversity, and a lot of interesting data that you can correlate to your symptoms and what you've experienced your whole life. And what I've noticed with my results is it does line up exactly, which tells me that genetics is real and that it matters. And I love the supplement connection that Tyler's highlighting, how different supplements will affect us and the dosages and all of that. Since speaking with him, both in this interview and it did a private consultation with him, I've been adding lemon balm into my routine. And a lot of people drink lemon balm tea at night to calm down. But what's interesting, as he said, is it prevents GABA degradation. When I did my consultation with Tyler, he told me that I have increased metabolism of GABA. So basically decreasing my overall GABA and making me more prone to over excitation. And lemon balm helps a lot with that. So just knowing these little tricks can be really helpful for someone. So if you want to dive more into Tyler's work, he's on Instagram. His account name is Dr. Tyler Panzner. And if you want to check out Self-Decode, he has a code Dr. Pans for 15% off on that website, selfdecode.com, if you have your DNA file. As I'm recording this, they put 6 new markers up. So platelets, creatinine, fasting glucose, red blood cells, IGF-1, and testosterone. So they're constantly updating it based on new research, which is cool. So you can just keep finding out new stuff about your particular genetics. And my website is matt-blackburn.com. You could read about my CLF protocol, check out recipes, see all of my recommended products. All of the products up there are things that I use myself and endorse, and I'm continually updating it and adding new products. So keep an eye on that page. And my brand is called Mitolife. You can find that at mitolife.co. And any day now, the new beef liver product will be out, and also a super limited supply of USA sourced elk velvet that was harvested from small farms and freeze dried. So I'm really excited to share that with you all, as that's a product that I've been taking for years and I really love it. If you want to dive deeper into my work, I have a Mitolife Academy on YouTube. So every month I put out 2 private videos and then a live Q&A the last day of the month. And if you sign up for $15, you get access to the last 2 years of videos, which are quite a lot. And it's basically health optimization of how you can upgrade things around your house and different tips and tricks that I've learned over the years. So that's it. I'll see you guys next Friday, and stay supercharged.